welcome again to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, along with Piano for My Friends every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Thank you to all of you who support and encourage me via the links available on the support page of my website. You'll find a link to that page in the video description. Any drop in the tip jar is appreciated. And the Patreon, if you want to take a look at that, is a unique take on that, particularly if you watch either or both of these videos regularly. I keep wanting to say live streams. We stopped doing that close to a year ago, or maybe even more, I don't know, or less or something. Some of you will remember a little problem with Facebook, and I just said, heck with this, and moved over to YouTube and record these also when it can work out, which is not always the same time every week. So this makes it easier. So for this series, this monthly stream again, I share perspectives or experiences or thoughts or something that I think might be helpful or informative or interesting or something. My view from the piano bench is right here, but that's not what I mean. So the topic today, or tonight, whenever this is it doesn't end when it's over. I was playing around earlier today with a lot of different takes on this, specific examples of it, and realized that this broad theme will be good, and it's a theme that I've talked about before. You might remember I've given this illustration once, possibly twice, so hopefully you don't mind me repeating it, and if you haven't heard it, good. But this will be a good setup. There was a little window of time in the local scene that I live in that I was involved in musical directing some theater productions. Most especially at the Churchill Theater, which is a wonderful community theater, award-winning, and yeah, it's pretty amazing for what it accomplishes and what it can do in a very rural place like this, where you don't think a lot of people live and a lot of people don't. But it's very well supported and well attended, and there's a lot of theater energy. And that whole theater energy experience was completely new to me when I came in, kind of being not coerced, but encouraged to come in by the then director of the theater. And it was a role that needed to be filled, and I was able to do it, and I brought my own sensibilities to it. And that's actually something that I can talk about at some point. One of the things that I don't know that all of the performers got entirely behind or used to or just hadn't heard before was one of my little emphases, that being correct or being right as opposed to wrong means that everyone's in agreement. So let's say there's a passage or a place or something that is difficult for everyone to do, like you're pulling it from the page basically, and it's just not gelling, and the visions aren't working out or people aren't feeling it. But if there is I don't want to say version of it, and if there is an interpretation of it that just by nature of being an interpretation wouldn't be far off from it, that everybody feels and everybody can do and everyone's in the same place with, and it just happens, and we can take our minds off of trying to get it right because we're already totally in it. And I know that in some cases that might not work, but for the most part, and in the community theater particularly, it's like, okay, this is right, this is what it is, we all agree. That's one of my little things I brought in, and yeah. But a big brick wall for me was the first show that I did. Uh, and we went through like the intense rehearsal process because you're rehearsing most nights of the week, especially as you get right up to it. And then you're every night and you're to the wall, right? And then you have 3 weekends of shows. And fortunately, once you're in that first weekend of shows, you don't have to be there throughout the weeks anymore because you know what you're doing, supposedly. And but still, that energy, that momentum is still going forward, right? And you're just so in it. And of course, the theater community is amazing. Uh, it's a strong bond. It's a camaraderie. I'm so impressed by it. We get to the end of the performance. Last night, the audience leaves the theater, set starts coming down, and I realize that it's over. And I had kind of a Charlie Brown standing on the pitcher's mound with nobody on the field moment. Where it's like, over? My world doesn't have over. I don't do over. Because there's just this unspoken or just tacit, not even explicitly considered sense that one thing leads to another, leads to another. Everything is ultimately part of one big flow continuum. But that's certainly not what that experience is, and it made me understand my world a little bit better. And it's interesting to contemplate that I've, especially preparing this, when I'm realizing it, that it's even now more difficult for me, just in general, to leave one space and enter another. I'm discovering that, from one gig to the next, or from one task to another, and now that I have to actually put some words to it and express it and think about it, this is a good exercise for me. I realize that I take that as a kind of a validation that I am where I'm supposed to be. I'm more consistently and thoroughly in those moments. And of course, each moment is new. And of course, when you're in some other moment, you're in some new thing. But there is a sense that overall space, the longer you go without it closing, the more wonders you find, so to speak. I'm getting esoterically ridiculous, but I think you know what I'm trying to say, or I think hopefully I know what I'm trying to say, or maybe I don't. But each of those moments, of course, is that new space. So what's new? Everything. pause up. No, what's new? Well, you'll tune in. I make more of an effort, or more of a priority, or more of a purpose on the Thursday night piano for my friends videos to have more of a variety. Probably not a lot, but there are more pseudo contemporary tunes that I do here. I'm just going from the bag of comfort zone and comfort food tunes and things that kind of express whatever I'm trying to say. So yeah, this is for like the people who are in it. Yeah, which is actually what this is about. This is about being in it. And speaking of being in it, so when I say it doesn't end when it's over, because you're carrying that with you, it also doesn't begin when it starts. And for me, a really important thing is, really important thing is that I realized when I wrote this, there was something I was going to put here, and I forgot. And I'm going to write it down right now because I'm going to forget in the next 12 seconds, maybe the next 4. And I just remembered. Now maybe I won't talk about it, but at least I'll remember. So in the morning, when I first get up, and I try to do this before I do much of anything else, and particularly before I attempt to communicate verbally or even like respond to text or things. I try to get here at the piano and which is a little hard for me to demonstrate because this is still kind of a performance thing, and when I'm setting the space, I'm going into kind of free improv mode, but it's free improv with a particular purpose of letting go. Free improv could be, for some people, it's like, okay, what good idea do I have now? That's not it. It's just letting it happen. And as I've described before, some of you may have heard this, it will start random, typically, and I allow it to just go where it goes and eventually kind of coalesces into the structure of something familiar. And I could be playing Misbehaving all of a sudden 3 minutes after I start, or 10 minutes, or even 20 seconds, but I'm setting the performance space, the artistic space. I'm allowing things to come through me, so I'm putting myself in a particular position, and that's important for me to do first, because I might not, or probably won't be able to easily, at least, open up the space later when I have to perform. So I try to carry it with me all day, which carries its own challenges, okay? But one way to, I guess, imagine or visualize what this is, it's kind of related to the sometimes when I get into these transition spaces in between tunes for piano for my friends, if you watch that, and I'm understanding more, or seeing more, that is an important target for me, because those transitions between tunes, where one blurs into the other, and that thing in the middle is just some bridge that forms out of the fog, right? That's what I'm talking about, and that's the space. And I even kind of, at this point, judge or evaluate, I should say, my sense of connection to the space with those transitions or things that can happen within tunes that are just like the real letting go. And if I talk about my own musical or artistic growth, a lot of it is going to be evaluated from my perspective or my view at this point on what's happening there. And that would be like another validation for me. And let me do the example, and then I'll go back to the thing that I wrote in to add. So again, this is not a switch that I can turn on and off necessarily. So I have to put myself in that moment. When I did that very little brief, free improv thing that was relatively effective and kind of showing what it is I do, although it can be anything. I'm going to try to end one tune. I'm just pick a tune. I'll pick Moon River. I'll play Moon River, play a chorus of Moon River. And then I'll go into another tune. I wrote almost like Being in Love. I don't know why. But we'll see where I go. And if I even start with Moon River, I might not. But what I'm going to try to do is be in the one tune, be in the next tune, but then be in the space in the middle that connects the two, but is its own space. And I think just the idea of this can illustrate, me saying as a general concept, for me anyway, it doesn't end when it's over, right? Because it never stops. I was with some friends yesterday. Part of the conversation, one of the lines that I'll often use, and I said this to them, if somebody asks me or says, like, I wish I could do what you do, and if I'm feeling the least bit kind of ornery, I'll say, no, you don't. You think what goes on in my head that lets me play like this stops going on in my head when I walk away from the piano? I have to live with this. Be thankful. Kind of related to that, right? But that's what I'm going for. Yeah. Okay, what am I doing? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that sort of worked for as an example of this. Maybe a little too much cognitive awareness of just what I'm doing, trying to illustrate or demonstrate. So I don't know that I completely got separated from Moon River. I guess I did, but then by that time that I did, I was already sort of previewing for a while the next tune, you know. But that was a transition, you know, and that kind of thing. And I guess I should say too that the idea of playing for an hour and not stopping, well, to breathe, of course, and even, you know, trying to keep the time going and taking a drink from my water bottle that I keep down here. But that piano bar gig that I've talked about recently in one of these, more recent videos, redundant. The I really kind of solidified for me the idea of just going and not stopping. And the emphasis was not so much on the transitions. They would happen. But I've taken that and taking it further here. And I'm realizing that that's kind of a signature for me at this point. And, you know, as things reveal themselves to you, then you appropriate them, because now they're there. You see them, you acknowledge them, and they can, you know, continue to evolve and become something, right? The one sort of similar thing that I've looked at for a long time and not tried to copy, but maybe emulate a little, but just like be, you know, understanding of how important or how significant it is in the context is when Earl Gardner would play, and he would just, you know, and totally unrelated, and he'd just noodle around for a while, and then he'd start the tune. And it's like, you know, I could look at that space like similar to when I described when I first heard Dave McKenna play, and I heard him walking the left-hand bass line. I'm like, I'm glad he thought of that, because apparently I couldn't think of that on my own. What in the heck, you know? And yeah, right. So it's like that very deeply has come into my expression. The idea of like standalone tunes, starting in that free place, and less so, but the transitions between tunes. So once it's going, I guess that's what it is. And starting and stopping can be an issue for me. Or starting again once I've stopped, or stopping once I've started. Well, I illustrate that every week, don't I? And then why don't we just say this? I don't really have the on-off switches that some performers do, you know, or as I wrote it here, I don't have a performer's switch. And there was one of the comments from a very nice person who would follow the Escape from Home Piano Hour back when it was a stream, and I pulled it off and put it on my website and attributed it to him, which is, this man is authentically sharing himself. And so he's talking about me. And that was of course very validating, and that's what this is about. And what I am portraying to you is something, it's not something I'm trying to do, it's something I'm living and being at the time. And when the gig or the show or the whatever is over, I'm still living it internally. You know, that's, you know, that little wall doesn't go up in here. Compartmentalizing, no. And is the inability to completely or effectively compartmentalize in some respects a horrible life skill? Absolutely. But you learn to work with who you are. It's very similar to me saying I only have a wide angle lens, and you just make it work with what you got. But that's still living it internally and still being, that moment is still traveling with you. Uh, would lead to something that I nicknamed, and that sort of became the name of it, the post game show. Particularly with one band that I worked with years ago, and one leader who, once we're all on the way home, uh, it wouldn't take long for me to get a phone call. Yeah, and then we are going through the whole gig, right? Uh, because we're still living it, and there are a few people in my orb who, I brought that concept in or had that concept, or in one case was part of that band, uh, and got time for the post game show on the drive home. Click, and off you go. Uh, and one of the many examples of uh, what could easily provoke a post game show, or could be an experience that you know you're living and then it doesn't go away when it's over, would be the last First Friday show with the Mainstay that just happened this past Friday with Nick Bucci and Kelly Vale. Uh, and I'll probably forget. Now I'm saying I should put a link in the video, description. But if I forget, it's easy to find. Go to the Mainstay live streams YouTube channel, because I would imagine now that the Mainstay live streams its shows, which is relatively new. But all my First Friday shows are there. They stay there. And if you go there before the weekend, actually there won't be a show this weekend. There'll be a fundraiser, which I don't think is being live streamed. Maybe it will be. But it'll be the first thing there, the first video. But you'll see First Friday with Joe Holt. The Next Great American Songbook is it's the title. And yeah, if you watch that show, it's kind of cool, and it had some challenges for me. And actually, what I was thinking of doing was starting for this series a thread of shows, or a series of, I cannot communicate. I'm sorry. Called Post Game Show, and I was going to post game show, and then I name a particular gig, and then this My View from the Piano Adventure will be all about that gig. And that's where I was going, and I decided to just wrap that all up into the title. It isn't over when it's finished, or it isn't finished when it's over, or it doesn't end before it started, or whatever I said this title was. Oh my goodness. And that show, even if you watch some of it, you'll get a sense of the level of connection on the stage. I was going to use the word intensity. There was an intensity and a connection, but you had three people on the stage, and we're all in that space, so we're all sharing that space. So you can imagine that that afterward, none of us were really moving quickly. In fact, Nick and Kelly were out in their car, and they're just basically sitting there, and they're going over the experience before they even start driving home. And I get in my car, and I'm there, and they're still over there, and nobody's driven home yet. And then I get a text from somebody who wasn't at the show, who couldn't be, but had something very nice to say, and I had to walk over and show it to them, and and all that. And that energy was just like still going on. And if we talk about both ends of that, like it isn't over when it's finished or isn't finished when it's over, or whatever I said, or it doesn't, you know, what the heck did I say? It doesn't begin when it starts before it begins, or something, or it always is starting. Because there was a lot of energy that week for me, hours and hours, many hours that week, getting myself around those tunes. That and that was one of the things about the show now that I can go back and look at and evaluate and see, because that was one of the shows where I put myself in the position of being uncomfortable for most of it. Mainstay Monday was a real exercise in that, because I would get entirely into the spaces of whoever I was with, and just try to be in spaces I don't usually go in. And sometimes that requires a lot of prep. This required a lot of prep, but it really wasn't feasible to do until like the week of. And so I'm just living with all these tunes that I should know, given my age, but you know my story. I kind of left my culture behind and didn't pay attention to much of it. And then, all of a sudden, I'm just not aware of things that people, especially musicians my age, would be aware of. One little funny illustration, I don't know if I've said it on mic, on video, whatever, or not. There was this one gig maybe 10 years ago that I happened to be on, and it was probably the only time that I can imagine in the world of, American musicians, where a particular tune was called, which was Mustang Sally. And there's one guy in the bandstand who'd never played it, which was me. And because that tune is played, gig after gig, and that's just been one of those stock tunes in normal gigs, not mine. But not only had I never played it, I actually never even heard it, which wasn't necessarily a problem getting through it, because you just listen. But I just was very amused by that, and that sort of related to this. So if you have the time and you haven't seen, or weren't at the show, or haven't seen the live stream archive, watch it. And when you watch it, you will really enjoy Kelly and Nick. They're wonderful performers and musicians. But you'll be able to see, particularly since I'm hipping you to it, but some of it's just obvious, where I was comfortable and where I wasn't, and where like my papers were out of order, or I couldn't find something and I just let them go because they were kind of self-sufficient. I came in later and I sort of figured it out, or I started for 2 notes in the wrong key, and then kind of thing. But you can just you can keep score of where it was just a bullseye for me, and where the heck is it? Oh, here it is, kind of thing. So I'll play one of the tunes that I was most comfortable in. I've looked at it. I haven't watched the whole thing front to back, but yeah. If I really know the tune, like this tune, I was pretty comfortable. I'm not sure how effective an illustration that is because my mind right now is so scattered. I'm thinking of so many things, which is typically okay, except I'm thinking about things related to this and what I was going to say and what. Yeah, I guess I was comfortable. I don't know. Judge it how you will. Oh yeah, because the thing I was thinking that I wanted to remember to say, and maybe I have now, is that is a tune that you can see the interaction between Nick and I, and just some things to like. I guess you look for, and the connection between musicians. Okay, I'm speaking poorly. Stop. The connection between musicians on stage totally translates to the audience because it's that same connection. If the musicians are really connected on stage and the energy is there, that's the lasso around the room. I mean, that can also happen when you're on stage by yourself, but you could see that connection, the connection going between Nick and I, and between Nick and Kelly, and between Kelly and myself, which was really cool. So here's a little inside baseball. What you didn't see was when Nick and Kelly first set up, the mics were set up, and I guess I walked away and came back in, and then Kelly was in the middle, Nick was off to the side, and I was on the other end, which is not how it wound up. And I try not to disrupt, I try to like go along and accommodate what people want to do, but I'm thinking, no, I'm gonna have to really communicate with Nick and the show, because I still didn't know what I was doing in a lot of these tunes or specific arrangements or whatever. And at first, I won't say there was pushback, but it was like, let's sing her in the middle, and that looks good. And I'm like, okay, that's one consideration. But what I said that made it understandable, uh, particularly to Nick, was, yeah, but on stage you usually have the rhythm section together for a reason. The rhythm section is physically together; it's not spread all out, right? Right. So they switched. So when you look at the video, Kelly's on one end, and then Nick was tucked up to me, and there was all this communication, mostly not verbal, some of it, but it could happen so much better right there, right? And you could see some of that in that tune. Yeah, and so I'm reading my notes here. Yeah, one post-game show communication thread that didn't happen. We didn't talk about it afterwards. Was a stage setup, which I just talked about. And then once the show started, Nick said something, soon after, like, "Yeah, okay, this is correct," essentially. Now, if you watch the last tune, which is the Annie Ross / Joni Mitchell tune "Twisted," then you can see that energy that was just the product of the entire show, the entire gig. And we carried that energy off the stage with us internally. It was a really, really nice crowd response. Everybody loved the show. We were feeling great about it. And hopefully the audience members were too. And based on comments that I got, it was a super feel good. It was great. But that energy, specifically now looking at the performers, looking at my experience, my view from whatever bench I'm sitting on, is that it doesn't end when it's over. Now I'm reading it so I get the words right. And I think that if you watch that, that makes sense to you, how it wouldn't be over when it ended or something. So I'll just play a little bit on basically a blues in C, which is what that tune is, the last tune, "Twisted." And I'm getting ahead of my notes here, but I just wrote, I finally got Nick to take a wide open, guitar solo on that very last tune, which I wanted him to do. He's a wonderful accompanist on guitar and that bag. But once I get the actual video file, I'm gonna post probably "Twisted" and/or "Crazy" or both, because they're both really fun and they both really kind of portray things I'm talking about, things that you wouldn't think about specifically from the audience, but I think makes sense when I talk about them. Of course, I might not be making any sense at all, in which case I heed the advice often given to me: shut up and play the piano. the moment captured on the video is more fun. And then you can say that a new kind of metaphysical space exists after that gig that didn't exist before, related to my friend Bruce Kaminsky, who would say that two or more people can make music together is proof of the existence of God, right? Because it's just, it's happening out there, right? And it's this new sort of, energy, right? And we all get to carry that with us that we didn't have before. We got this new thing. You can kind of get a little sense of how, a musician's heart can be really full, like all the time, and it can be really joyful. I mean, there are reasons we do this, and it's not for fame and fortune. In popular culture that can happen, but that's not the point. And I think you understand that. The point is the life we get to lead, and multiply that, what I'm talking about on this particular experience for me, and also for Nick and Kelly, gig after gig, night after night, and you get a sense of what the deal is, and now I go back to the theater thing, and it's like, over? I don't do over. What's over? One thing just leads to another. And this is also related to 1 or 2 weeks ago, whenever I did not full time but all the time. Trying to put some words to when I get myself in a situation where I'm somehow forced to defend that this is actually my job, and I would try to illustrate that it's a full-time job. I had to spend hours doing this, and it's like, it's 80 hours a week already, and I'm not done, kind of thing. But then it made more sense to just say, no, it's just all the time. It's the life we lead from, waking up to going to bed. And it's not about being a workaholic. There can certainly be that. But this is different. It's living in the space, carrying the moments with you, and you can get a sense of how and why being a musician becomes a life that we lead, and we're in it, and we're just all the way in it. all the way. Right. So I have a minute. So let's go back and that thing I wrote for myself that I meant to put there and I wound up skipping over because I've used it before as an illustration once or twice, but it absolutely works here. So forgive me if you've heard this before. But some years ago, I had a student, a young student, school age, who had some, developmental, had some challenges. Brilliant kid. But the structure and the learning, you had to kind of accommodate. And he could improvise a storm, but you really couldn't structure him. And so I was able to help him own what he did, and then to some extent, not in a traditional sense, but the extent I could, give him the sense of structure and ownership. And it was clear to me that I could easily approach this with him in terms of the space, just being in the moment and letting it come through him. And he was going to play in his school talent show. And what he would do, because really, I don't want to say all he could do. I mean, what he could do remarkably was just sit down and freely play. And then his one of his parents asked me to give him a fallback, give him a safety net, give him something he can do if he gets up there and he blanks out so he doesn't embarrass himself. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the worst thing I could do. Because what he's got going for him, and it's funny, what I'm aspiring to, it's exactly what I'm aspiring to is what he has going for him, is he was unencumbered by those structuring things that he wasn't attached to and weren't going to help him. And if he had to deal with them, they were going to pull him out of his space. That was a sure recipe. You give him a safety net, and then he will certainly need it. And that safety net won't be anything near to the depth that what he could do if he were doing what he could do. Related to what you've heard me, quote Keith Jarrett, that, when I'm at the piano, my hand knows what to do. Not only does it know what to do, if I try to tell it what to do, I'm stopping it. Not only am I stopping it, I'm stopping it from doing something better than I can think of. So what I did instead, and I don't know if I told the parent that I defied them before or after the talent show, but I went the opposite way, and I said, okay, here's what I need you to do for a talent show. If you have to get up a little early, get up a little early. Give yourself a half hour at the piano. You're going to open up the space. You're going to put yourself in that zone. You're going to walk out the door to school ready to go sit down at the piano when it's time for the talent show. And that's what I purpose to do. And then I communicated with the parent afterward, and the parent said, did it go well? Oh, wait, great. He had to do, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, 7 encores. Some ridiculous amount of, again and again and again, where, knowing him, he would have gotten a different space, each time. And that's what it's about. You carry it with you, and it's just beautiful joy to do so. Along with a lot of other, practical frustrations and things like this, or as my band leader friend who would initiate the post-game shows would say, it's a horrible business. I like the playing part. So yeah. So anyway, thanks for being here. What's funny, depending on what time of the day I record these, I'm more articulate and whatever than other times. So I don't know if I'm entirely consistent in how I deliver these. So thank you for dealing with me, particularly if you watch these regularly. I so appreciate it. And I'll have some cool things to announce and tell you about as we go down the road. Particularly if you receive my email newsletter, shoot me an email if I don't have your email address. I try to remember to link them up on Facebook if you follow my musician page when I do them each month. But let's just keep communicating with each other. Let's share the space. Let's keep it going because it's not over. Although I might be finished for right now, but it's never finished, right? Whatever. See ya.